Hello PLP Geometry. Welcome to the 6th lesson of Unit 2, where we're going to talk about triangle congruence. Alright, so here is a big lesson, an important lesson. Following this lesson are going to be some lessons on proofs, right? Because triangle congruence proofs are very important, okay? Or proving triangles congruent is important. Okay, so this is Unit 2. Again, congruence transformations. So we're pretty much past the congruent transformation part, and now we're focusing on triangles. Okay, this is our 6th video on triangle congruence. Okay, so we talked about congruent figures, right? And the fact that corresponding parts of congruent figures are congruent, right? So every triangle has 3 angles and 3 sides. Well, we don't need to know that all 3 angles are congruent to all 3 angles of another triangle, or that all 3 sides are congruent to all 3 sides of another triangle in order to say that the triangles are congruent. We can limit the amount of information we need to only 3 pieces of information, right? So there are 5 ways I'm going to talk about of how to prove triangles congruent. All right, so 5 ways. 5 ways to prove triangles congruent. And again, we're going to talk about those ways and how to identify those ways in this lesson, and then actually do some of these proofs in the next lesson. So 5 ways to prove triangles congruent. Okay, the first way is by what is called side, side, side. What's nice about these ways is that their names tell you what you need to know, right? And side, side, side is SSS. So for side, 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 you need 3 sides of 1 triangle congruent to 3 sides of another triangle. So I'm going to draw 2 triangles. I'm going to try to make them congruent looking, right? But I'm going to change the orientation. So here's going to be triangle ABC. And then I'm going to make triangle DEF like this. So put D down here, E here, and F like this. Okay, so do your best to try to draw them the same, but you can see one's kind of rotated. All right. Okay, so in this picture, in order to use side, 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 you have to see this. You have to see 1 pair of sides congruent. So that would be, I'm going to write over here, so that would be segment AB would have to be congruent to segment DE. You'd have to see a second pair of sides congruent. So we'll do BC and EF. So you'd have to see that BC is congruent to EF. And you'd have to see that the third pair of sides, AC and DF, are congruent. If you know that all 3 sides of one are congruent to all 3 sides of the other, then you can prove that the 2 triangles are congruent. Now I'm going to name the first triangle, triangle ABC is congruent to. And now the second one has to be named correspondingly. So if you look at how I named the sides, A corresponds with D. It's always in the same position. Oh, triangle, sorry. Triangle. Put a little triangle symbol there first. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle D and then E. So A to B, D to E, and then F. And that'd be by side, side, side. And that's what we're going to look to do in these proofs, is to find the 3 pieces of information and then say the triangles are congruent by the appropriate way. Okay. Next one, way number 2, is going to be side, angle, side. S-A-S. So now, for this triangle congruence method, we need 2 sides and the angle between, and the angle between. That's an angle symbol of one triangle. Congruent to 2 sides and the angle between of another triangle. There's a lot of writing in this video, so I apologize if I'm going fast in that writing. Again, listen to my words. All right? So I'm going to draw another set of triangles right down here. So I'll draw, call this RST, just trying to use different triangles. And then I'll draw this triangle over here, again trying to make it congruent if I can. We'll call this X, this is Y, and this is Z. Okay, so in this picture, I need to know that 2 sides are congruent amongst the 2 triangles. So let's put one here and one there. All right? And let's put a second pair of sides. Let's put double marks here and here. So we're going to write this down in a second. But now, which angle is the angle between those sides? Well, the easiest way to do it is to trace the sides marked congruent. If you trace them, then you create an angle, and that angle is right here. That is the side in between those two. I'm sorry, that's the angle in between those 2 sides. Same thing here. If you trace the two sides marked congruent, Y is the angle. So in this picture, first, I have segment ST congruent to segment YZ. Right? Then I have angle S congruent to angle Y. And lastly, I have side SR congruent to side YX. And again, I'm just using the markings. So this is side, angle, side. Therefore, these 2 triangles are congruent. So I'm going to call the first one triangle RST would be congruent to. Okay, looks like R corresponds to X. Looks like S corresponds to Y, and then Z. So RST corresponds to XYZ, and that would be by side, angle, side. I'll erase that. All right, 2 down, 3 to go. Okay, next one here. Let's take a look at angle, side, angle. So now, if you take a look at that, we just kind of flip the words around, right? So the third one is angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle, ASA. So now we need 2 angles and the side between of one triangle congruent to 2 angles and the side between of another triangle. Okay, I'll draw my 2 triangles like this. So here's one of them. We're going to call that triangle, this is M, L, and N. Okay, I'll do the same thing. I'll just try to rotate it around just a smidge. Like that, close enough, right? This is S, R, and T. You can do your best to try to draw them the same. You know, it's tough, right? We're only humans. Okay, so if I take a look at these two triangles, I want to use angle, side, angle. So let's say that angle M and angle S are congruent. Let's say that angle N and angle T are congruent. Then the side in between is the one that connects the two congruent angles. So if I trace M to N, that's going to be the congruent side. If I trace S to T, that's going to be the congruent side. And you're done. So angle M is congruent to angle S. Segment or side MN is congruent to segment or side ST. And that angle N is congruent to angle T. If you know these three things, angle, side, angle, then the two triangles are congruent. So triangle LMN is congruent to, so L corresponds to R, M corresponds to S, and N corresponds with T. Triangle LMN is congruent to triangle RST by angle, side, angle. Nice. Okay, two more. Number 4 here. So now we're going to take a look at angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side, or AAS. Okay, so now notice where the side is. It's not in between the angles, it's after the angles. So now we want two angles and a side not between of one triangle, congruent to two angles, and a side not between of another triangle. Two angles and a side not between of one triangle congruent to two angles and a side not between of another triangle. So here's my two triangles. Again, I feel like they're having us draw the same triangles, but we're using different lettering just to practice. So I have U, V, and W. And then for this one, I have X, Y, and Z. Okay, so for instance, say that I know that angle U is congruent to angle X. And say that I know that angle V is congruent to angle Y. Then I don't want to use the side between those two angles. So if I were to trace UV, I don't want to use that side. Same thing, I don't want to use XY. So you can pick either of the other two sides, just a side. So I'm going to pick VW and I'm going to pick YZ. So in this picture, I know that angle U is congruent to angle X. I know that angle V is congruent to angle Y. And I know that segment VW, a side not in between those angles, is congruent to segment YZ, a side not in between those angles. Therefore, I now know that triangle UVW is congruent to triangle XYZ. So UVW, XYZ, and this is by angle, angle, side. Okie doke. Last but not least, all right, we have this different one. Number 5. This is called hypotenuse leg, or HL. And you're like, hypotenuse? What the heck is hypotenuse? right? Oh my goodness. Well, if you remember your 8th grade, you talked about hypotenuse, or hypotenuses, maybe? Okay, so what the hypotenuse leg theorem says, right? It says I need the hypotenuse, let me use HYP, hypotenuse, and one leg, we'll talk about what a leg means, of a, and now here's the big word, of a right triangle. So if you remember hypotenuses and legs, those are the sides of a right triangle. So if the hypotenuse and one leg of a right triangle congruent to the hypotenuse, let me write that better, the hypotenuse and one leg of another right triangle. Okay, so if this situation occurs, then we know these two triangles are congruent by hypotenuse leg. So first, let's draw a true triangle. So we need to draw right triangles. So here's this triangle. Let's call it M, L, and N, and let's make L the right angle. Let's draw this right triangle here. This is going to be Q, R, and P, and let R be the right angle right there. So these are right triangles. All right. So the first thing I'm going to say right now is that triangle LMN and triangle, so LMN, triangle RPQ are right triangles. And I know that because they have the right angle. So that's the first thing you need to state, right? This HL cannot be used unless the triangles are right triangles. Now, in a right triangle, this right angle points to the hypotenuse. So MN is my hypotenuse in this triangle. QP is my hypotenuse in this triangle. So they have to be congruent. So we know that MN is congruent to PQ. Again, those are the hypotenuses. And then another pair of sides, which are called legs. These other two pairs of sides are called legs. Another pair of legs must be congruent. So let's use ML and PR. So then ML is going to be congruent to PR. And that's the pair of legs. So if I know these three things, right triangle, congruent hypotenuses, congruent pair of legs, then I know that these two triangles, I'll call this triangle LMN, congruent to triangle, so L is the right angle, so R will go down to P and then Q. Triangle LMN is congruent to triangle RPQ by HL. And there we go. So this assignment is just all recognition. You're going to have 10 problems. You have to tell me how they're marked. Is it HL? Is it side, angle, side, 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 side? Is it angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side? All right? Okay. Thanks for watching. Good luck on your practice.